Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Troy Meachum, Chief Encouragement Officer at ACR Supply based in Durham, North Carolina. As you will hear in this interview, Troy is a man of faith, and he makes no bones about it. Where many may feel uncomfortable in the presence of someone who is so open about their beliefs, Troy does it in a way that helps you understand that this is just him. No preaching, no pretense, just a way of life. That transparency is how he invites people into his organization through attraction versus promotion. I came away with the understanding that Troy is a builder, not only of organizations, but of character as well. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do too. All right. Well, hey, Troy, thank you so much for joining us on Distribution Talk today. I always appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason.
Well, as you know, on the show, I like to talk a little bit about history. How did you get involved with distribution? Why did you stay involved might be the better question. But if you wouldn't mind, just share with us a little bit about how did you get involved?
Sure. It's kind of a long story. I'll try to make it short. Back in 1977, on March the 18th, it was my 16th birthday. My dad was working for another distributor at the time, and they weren't doing so well at the time. He decided to go hang out his own shingle. So it was that 16th birthday, March the 18th, he received a phone call where they let him go. And he had already decided he was going to start his own thing. And so my dad started ACR Supply the very next day. Jason, this is a great story. It goes with this whole American dream. His first desk inside of his first location was an old door sitting up in the edge or the corner of the warehouse he rented. Yeah. And he found a pallet of press-on antifreeze. He took the press-on antifreeze, made legs out of it, and put the door on top, and that was his first desk.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
And so he started ACR Supply on an old wooden door. And that was, like I said, that was in March of 77. I joined right out of school in 1980. And worked with him for several years. And in 1984, opened up our first branch location, our first store location in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Gotcha.
So my dad took me over there. It was one of those sink or swim moments. We've all got him right. And he put me over there. He built 4 walls, a roof, and he left. So I had to work with our purchasing guy and our finance person, and I had to build it from the ground up. And so that was probably one of the more pivotal moments in my life where I realized, I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to be your stereotypical son of the boss.
Right.
And I want to be successful. And so it was 4 years after that, after I opened up that location in Chapel Hill, something really, the most important thing that happened to me in my life was when I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. And when Jesus came into my life, he began to really transform me in a lot of different ways. The area of working with people and beginning to understand probably for the first time, Jason, that people were my ministry and that I could do. I love to do mission work, but you know what? The biggest mission field is right there on my sales counter and with my team. And so that radically transformed my life. And I began to really work on trying to glorify God in every aspect of my life. Flash forward a few more years, I came back to the Durham store where my dad made me general manager. We had 3 locations at that time. And 1977 was really the big pivotal moment for our company, in the sense that we were doing about $3.5 million in revenue a year. Not a lot of debt, doing just fine. But I had a lot more years to go, so did our vice president at the time. And we kind of came together and we said, you know what? We need a plan. We need to plan our work our plan. We've never done anything like this before, but we're going to give it our best shot. And we did. And so flash forward from that day to this day, we've grown from $3.5 million in 1997, this past year, we're like 33,300,000, something like that. A lot of things happened on that journey. We became a Copeland authorized distributor. We've recently taken on an HVAC equipment line. So we now have 8 different store locations, 10 different buildings, services office based out of Durham, North Carolina. And I bought the company from my dad about 15 years ago.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's a brief snippet of kind of my history and how I've done ACR Supply over my lifetime.
Troy, it is interesting. You had that pivotal moment where you decided that, and that was really going to be, and it still does define how you work with people. And as you said, really this is your ministry.
Yes.
The internal look. And I think some people feel like they have to look outside of their daily environment. You chose to look inside. So how is that? We'll kind of jump right into this.
Sure.
Is how has this ministry and this faith kind of transformed how you hire, how you deal with people, and really ultimately that culture of the organization?
Gotcha. That's a great question. Well, in that meeting in 97, we decided part of our first mission statement was to have a healthy work environment. That time, it sounded really good, but I didn't really know what it meant per se.
Right. Sure.
I was asking myself, what's that look like?
Yeah.
So I began to really focus on learning, what does a healthy work environment look like? Yeah. What do I do as a leader to create an environment where people get up every day and they want to come to work? Mm-hmm. And so step by step, I began to have those crucial conversations with just different people in the organization. Some of them were long tenured that were not contributing to a healthy work environment. Gotcha. And I would sit there, I'd say, okay, here's the deal. We need to identify what's broke. We're going to do everything we can to help you. And I'm all in. I'm going to invest my time, effort, money to help you grow and change. And the future's got to look like this. If we can't get from here to here in a certain time frame, I love you, but you can't stay. It's too important for ACR, our culture, and all the families we help support. And so that began after about the second or third time we are changed people. And so that's hard, especially if you consider your business a ministry. But Jason, what I learned was I could not burden all those individuals who are giving everything they've got every day with those who are not. Yeah. That's not being very compassionate. That's not being, and so as I began to make those changes that we did as a group, I'll be honest with you, our culture almost flipped overnight. We really began to work on what I said earlier, and that's building a work environment where people get up every day and they truly want to come to work. Now, I get it. Everybody has bad days. Sure. We all have bad days. Absolutely. But for the most part, you really do enjoy coming in and being a part of a team and being a part of a successful team. And so our current purpose statement is to build relationships, impact lives, and glorify God at work. I want them to have a best friend at work. Yeah. I want ACR to impact people's lives in such a way that the day that Mark or Corey or Brian retire, they can look back on their life and say their life was better off because they were a part of ACR Supply. And that we help them to grow personally, professionally, financially. And that last one is glorify God. That's the one rule I live by in my life. Everybody's got a bunch of different rules they try to live by. Sure. But I figure like this. If I glorify God in the way that I treat my wife, the way I treat my son, the way I treat our coworkers, our team members, the way we treat our customers, the way we treat our vendor partners, then I'm working for an audience of one. And if I can do that and please him, then I'll be a success in God's eyes. But here's what's really cool. When you do that, everything does seem to fall in place. Does that make sense? It does. Absolutely. I think, you develop a purpose and you ultimately realize this is how I want to conduct my life. And that spills into all aspects of my life. It just can't be compartmentalized in this one place on Sunday or whatever, day of worship. Yep. Really, it's the whole shooting match. I mean, it's the whole thing. Yeah. It's everything when it comes to culture. Sure. And when you're trying to create that culture, and for me, and so I started praying specifically that God would either bring Christian men and women into our organization that could be light in the marketplace in our industry, or convert those that are here. And God's done a miraculous work over the years. Mm-hmm. I got a dream job, Jason. I feel like I got the greatest job in the world because I work with an amazing group of people, and God's put an amazing team together. I do feel very, very fortunate. Sure. I've had the privilege of meeting several people and working with them, and absolutely I would agree with that. And Troy, speaking of the glorifying God and the purpose statement, have you ever run into situations where that's turned people off, or they've challenged that, or maybe they didn't really want to buy in? Right. I'll be honest with you. Quick answer is no. And that's kind of strange because we have scripture watermark on our invoices that get sent out every day. I get these nice calls from lady at AP out in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, thanking me for that, those kind of things. So we try to live out boldly. All of our monitors have scripture. We're constantly talking about the ministry things we're doing with Operation Resolute or Rock Solid or our orphanage in Burkina Faso, Africa. And so we live that out there. When people come into our organization, whether customers coming in, we're very transparent up front about who we are and what our purpose is, and that we want to glorify God in all that we do. So everybody kind of knows coming through the door. Sure. who we are. Now, benefit, I think you and I talked about this a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I live kind of in the South in the Bible Belt, right?
Sure.
Down here, living out your faith is not as, I guess, maybe rare or different like it would be maybe in the Northeast or the Northwest or whatever. But overall, we try to live out our faith every day and be consistent in what we do and how we treat people, how we love people. And that kind of leads into I think one of the topics you want to talk about is the ministry of ACR care.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. I think that geographically speaking, it does play into your hand a little bit. It makes it a little bit easier, maybe up here in the Pacific Northwest or our left coast over here, it might be challenged a little bit.
I'm sure it would be.
Yeah, I've spoken about that before. We shake our heads. And I think that, again, it may be how people grew up and what they were around most of their life growing up. And so, again, that might make it easier. Well, and that's something to actually consider as, your company eventually starts getting larger and larger in footprint. And as you start expanding that geographic footprint, there may be a challenge down the line. And that, hopefully that's something that you and your team have spoken about and kind of thought about a little bit, how you do want to handle it.
We make our HR person sweat. But luckily, she's a wonderful, Dee Dixon's our director of HR. And she's a believer as well. And she says, as long as we're transparent up front, there's not a whole lot people can say about it. But you know what, Jason, if you're not living it out, if you're not walking the talk and talking the walk, I mean, if you're not doing those things, you're a hypocrite and people will call you out in a heartbeat. We're not perfect. Don't get me wrong. We have our works like everybody else. We try to be consistent and do what we say we're going to do on a daily basis. And I think people eventually, long term, they respect that. And so people kind of know who we are. We're known around the state, and it's not really had a whole lot of pushback. I'm sure it will come at some point, though. Yeah. Like you said.
At some point, I've had interviews with other people, and they've had to go into that. Difficult conversations, sometimes coming up against HR situations that, okay, now we've got to really figure out is the best course of action. So one of the things, Troy, is you talked about having crucial conversations with individuals. And that kind of perked me up there. There was a book out called Crucial Conversations.
Oh, yes.
That is tough stuff. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure.
Like you've read that book or you've at least been around it.
I know a lot about that book. A number of years ago, a dear friend of mine named Tony Donato was working for an organization, and their HR department was implementing and executing a class called Crucial Conversations training. And so I was so infatuated about the topic, like you said. And so I started asking him a lot about it. Well, I found out you could actually be certified. You could take it, the course, 2-day course, and be certified to teach it.
Okay.
So I flew to Chicago. I got certified to teach the class many years ago. As I said, I got certified and took it. And so now if you come to ACR Supply, it's a 16-hour course. Everybody that comes into the ACR family has to go through that course of Crucial Conversations. So it's a wonderful book, but we actually have a workshop, 16-hour workshop, where people go through the class here at our home office. And I'll tell you something, it's one of the most wonderful things that's happened to me and our organization, just from a personal skill perspective, because everybody hates conflict. I believe false harmony is deadly, but people do not deal with conflict well normally. And so this is a wonderful book and a wonderful class about how to help people hold those conversations well and encourage them to hold those conversations and not sweep it under the rug.
Right.
Do enough of that stuff, it begins to mold and stink, and you have this volcanic eruption in a relationship or an organization. I actually had one of the guys tell me one time that him and his wife were going through a time in their lives, in their marriage, with the death of a daughter. And they went to this class and gave him the tools to be able to have the right conversation with his spouse to where long term, they were able to really start communicating again on a high level and find out what they really want. What they really wanted was to stay together and a happy marriage. So this is very rewarding. And again, everybody has to go through that class. I'll be doing another class this spring. So I'm pretty excited about that topic because that's part of my DNA now. So I love it.
Absolutely. And as you said, we don't innately understand how to deal with conflict very well.
Right.
And if we do not, and we don't have some sort of training like this, you try to bring in a session where people are talking about their challenges, it can get heated really, really quick. And it just, without structure, it can be very disruptive.
Yes.
People, it can be divisive. There's a lot of difficulty in really breaking down of that culture you've tried to build if people do not know how to discuss their challenges in a healthy manner.
I could not agree more. I'll tell you, one of the tools that you'll learn in crucial conversations training is a very simple thing. But if you just understand it, it's really, really powerful. But if you can make someone feel safe in a conversation, when you're having conflict with someone, if they don't trust you and trust your motive and trust that you have their best interest at heart, it's going to be almost impossible to have a crucial conversation with them. But the opposite is true. If somebody trusts you and they trust your motive and you have a deep level of rapport and you have a high level of trust, you can talk to almost anybody about almost anything. And I've seen that. Yeah. That's what the course says, but I've seen it happen over the years. And so whenever now conflict happens in our organization, and it happens everywhere, right? Because we're humans. I'll always encourage that person to go back to that person and have a conversation with them because they've been through the course, been through the training.
Sure.
And almost every single time, not every time, but almost every single time, after they get up the nerve to actually go have that conversation in a non-confrontational moment, almost every single time they end up being closer, the trust level's higher, and they end up working closer together. It's pretty amazing to watch. But see, we're afraid of conflict. We hate conflict. So that's why I was so passionate about taking that course and becoming certified to teach it. That's been a huge contributing factor to helping us build the culture we talked about.
Right. And it does. It helps you build a good working relationship, good core working relationship.
Yes.
Now, that's internally. How has that helped you all with external relationships and external conversations? Because I think it's got to bleed into that as well.
Yep. Well, I gave the example earlier of the guy with his spouse. A lot of spouses have benefited from this. Our people take this course. Oh, yes, they have. And they love it. And so
I am certain they have.
But also in our industry as a whole, everybody comes to our door or calling on the phone. They're dealing with something that's broken. So you know as well as I do, people calling or coming in don't always have the best attitude. You know what I'm saying? They're dealing with something broken. They might be in 20-degree weather. They might be under a house, dealing with critters, or it could be anything, right on top of a rooftop and the wind's blowing 50 miles an hour.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And so what it's allowed us, I think, to learn to do is to kind of meet people where they are. And it helps you to read people a little bit better, understand what kind of tone, their body language, those kind of things. So you're externally from a customer and even a vendor partner, it's allowed us to be able to read people better, to meet people where they are, and to build that trust and that rapport. And that's equipped us, I think, on the customer side to receive some really great customer evaluations, which we actually just did this past year. So we worked with TJ at Farmington Consulting, and he told us that the feedback we got from our customer survey that we were the top HVAC distributor in the nation as far as customer service. And much of that was based on the relationships that we have with our customers. And so we were number 3 overall, with the number 1 HVAC. We were behind an electrical distributor and a plumbing distributor. That made us feel really good. But I think a lot of these things we're talking about really paying off from a people perspective, communication perspective, internally and externally, like you said.
Well, it's tremendous investments. I mean, that's really what it is. It's investment in helping people grow and helping them accept it, that life is not going to be always a friendly exchange. It's not always going to be, we're not always going to be singing from the same sheet of music. There are going to be differing opinions. And if you look at, again, that manufacturer relationship, there are different agendas there. And I would say that this probably, and I'm going out on a limb here, but not too terribly far, but during this supply chain crisis we've had over the last year, I would imagine this training has been very valuable. I mean, you've been able to pull this one out several times.
It's definitely been challenging. In my 41-year career, I've never seen anything like what we're going through currently with supply chain. I do think kind of what's happened, though, is kind of become, I hate to say it, but kind of the norm. So it's not just at ACR, it's pretty much everywhere. And so I think that's kind of helped. But yeah, I believe this training has helped us with being able to deal with some of that stuff. And be truthful, be forthright. Try to take the blame. If you should own that blame, take it, apologize, do the right thing. But either way, just make sure you're communicating. And so we try to put processes in place where we're communicating, where we're trying to let people know, especially different vendors that are really running behind. So we're trying to be proactive. So when you're proactive in the area of communication, you really can avoid a lot of roadblocks, hurdles, or even train wrecks. So that's what we do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, it just really pushes towards that definition of integrity. As you were speaking there, I was thinking that is really, you're going to go and you're going to deal with tough challenges, but
Yep.
you will go through them with integrity.
Yep.
And I think that's, one of those things that I guess you would love to have as a badge as a company, is that this is a company that I want to work with. They live in integrity.
Yes. I can expand on that if you'd like.
Please.
We also do something else called Best Workplace Institute, actually Best Christian Workplace Institute. You may have heard of them before. It's a wonderful organization that really helps you measure the things we're talking about.
Okay.
It's probably one of the better things we've done to actually help measure our culture and to measure our team member satisfaction and team member engagement. So I'd highly recommend looking them up. So BCWI, or Best Christian Workplace Institute.
Okay.
We do that every year now. We're asking our people for feedback and we're acting on that feedback. And so that's been another tool that we've used to really help us build that right culture that we're talking about.
One of the things, Troy, you mentioned earlier, and then you and I have spoken about before, is some of your outreach programs, ACR Cares, and some of these things. Could you talk a little bit about that part of the organization, or that really part of you?
Love to. Actually, that's a big part of my life now. I'm 60 years old, actually 61 on Friday. And I'm really starting to hit my stride just from a ministry perspective again. Back when I bought the company from my dad over 15 years ago, me and my wife decided when we paid off that note to the bank from buying the company, we wanted to do something a little bit different. We wanted to really give back to our communities and to nationally and also internationally. And that's kind of the biblical model of giving and ministry anyway, international. And so we started ACR Cares. I represent them across the company, every location, and part of this ACR Cares team. And I lead the team now. And we actually have all types of ministry. We actually have a ministry matrix where mind, body, and soul to ACR team members, our families, and our communities. And so we plug in different ministries in that matrix because we want to make sure we're covering all bases, right? We want to make sure that we're taking care of our people and their families. And we're also taking care of our communities. And again, doing that locally, regionally, and internationally. So now we've got ACR Cares rolling and we're doing some really awesome stuff. I'll give you an example. Rock Solid Foundation, we work with them. We're actually doing a swing set build. And so they work with kids who have had serious diagnosis over the years.
Yeah.
They're all throughout North Carolina. So on April 2nd, we're going to go do a build up in the Greensboro area for a young kid who's going through a really difficult time right now. We start about 9 a.m. and usually by after lunch, finish, got them a nice, beautiful swing set. It's just phenomenal to be able to do that kind of that giving back to the community. But that's just one orphanage in Burkina Faso, Africa, that we decided that's one of the big ones that Sherry and me and my wife decided we wanted to do when we paid off the bank. So that's built. That's fully staffed now. We have 18 babies that are now in a country like Burkina Faso would probably not be alive today as a result of that. Those are some things that we do, but I'll lead that ministry. We're just trying to decide, like I said, internally and externally to our people and also the communities.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. And extremely rewarding.
Yes.
Again, from a structural standpoint, you are the CEO, but that is the Chief Encouragement Officer now.
That's right. That's my title.
In turning some of that stuff over, those daily decisions and things, that really has freed you up, turning it over to Mark.
Yep.
But that's freed you up to really focus on this.
Very much so. This and also spending time with people.
Yeah.
We've had so many different coaching programs over the years. We have a 3-year leadership development program called LEAD. Spending time doing those things, spending time with people, whether it be lunch, coffee, whether it be just on the job, just hanging out with them and getting to know them on a deeper level. So I'm still blessed. We got about 80 some team members and I spend time with them. I'm able to do more of that, which is really cool right now in this season of my career. And you're right, putting Mark as president now, which we did in 2020, and Corey's our COO, that's really began to free me up to do more and more of that kind of stuff I really love.
Yeah.
And I think that helps with building trust, team member or employee retention. It's really paid off, but definitely being able to spend time with people and also working on ACR Cares initiatives has been, like I said, I told you I got the greatest job in the world, man. I love it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's really the goal of any owner, is to build it to a place and develop people to a place where you can step back and do the things you really wanted to do in the first place.
That's right.
I guess I feel bad for those who don't, who feel like they have to have such control, they have to have their finger on every single piece, and they just can't let it go.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. That's a real tough one. Troy, before I let you go, I know you've been involved with the trade association with Hardy.
Yes.
And you dedicated time to them. Tell me why you raised your hand and said, I want to be a part of this. I want to be someone on the board of directors. I want to be a part of this.
Richard Cook told me I couldn't say no.
Okay, fair enough. There you go.
So it goes back a long time. Many years ago, my dad was a part of ARW. That was an association that was long before Hardy. And I think it was ARW and then HRW, I think. And then they merged many years later. And we've been involved really from day one of ACR supply industry associations like ARW or like Hardy. And we love giving back, but you need to learn so much. I don't think I've ever had a good original idea. I sincerely say that. But I've learned so much from people inside this industry. And so I just felt very dedicated and committed to our industry and doing everything I can to help our industry and move forward and to have a place in the supply chain. And so back when ARW was there, I was a regional director. And so Hardy came about, and several years into the Hardy organization, Richard Cook, who was the current president, came to me and wanted to know if I would go into the rotation onto the board of Hardy. It was kind of like a no-brainer. Yeah, I feel humbled and honored to do that. But any way that I can help the association, I want to do that. So that's how and why we got involved.
I completely agree. I mean, really, anytime you give into these organizations, you give of yourself. I truly believe that comes back to you tenfold. And as you said, there's some really smart people involved in this. And
oh, man, yes.
You get to learn, and people are very willing to share with you, and they really actually want to see your company succeed.
Yeah.
Even though maybe you might be close in geography, they still want to see you succeed. And I think that's one of the greatest reasons to be a part of those things. And I think also ensuring it for future generations, for future people in those organizations.
Some of my best friends are in this industry, and I love spending time with them, getting to see them. Sometimes I don't see them, but maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
It's invaluable. I just love them. And like I said, some of my best friends. So.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. Well, Troy, hey, I truly appreciate the time and appreciate you sharing your story. I mean, I think this is one of those things that young entrepreneurs are going to look at this and say, hey, I can actually shape the organization that I want to be in and I want to live in. And so that's really what I heard out of your story. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes, sir. Jason, thank you so much for having me. And I would be glad to help anybody, whoever, if I pass along. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career and learned from them. So I'd be glad to pass along any of that kind of wisdom that anybody could ever possibly need. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. All right. You take care, sir. And I hope our paths cross soon.
Thank you, Jason. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by Connected Peers. Connected Peers is a new organization dedicated to providing fast-paced monthly networking opportunities for distribution industry managers. To learn more about how Connected Peers can bring solutions to your role, visit us on the web at www.connectedpeers.com.